One does not simply forget their youth. One does not simply forget the PS2. One does not simply forget their impending death and doom. I see in your eyes the same fear that would take the heart of me. A day may come when we forget the value of vintage games, when we forsake our past and break all bonds of preference. But let that not be today. Let's do a little bit of reminiscing about what it was like to grow up with the PS2. As you can see on the footage, today I'm going to be talking about the PS2 and one of my favorite PS2 games that you cannot get anymore. Now, this is just a 6th generation game, Lord of the Rings Return of the King movie tie-in game, but it is a wonderful, wonderful experience that we will never see again because of licensing agreements and stuff like that. In fact, most games on the PS2 are gone. You are never going to get them again, and it's a shame because it truly was a magical time for gaming. That was the jump from the PS1 to PS2, which, following the SNES was a massive jump in itself. There's just an insane jump constantly, and the PS2 is when we saw the creation of multiple genres. We saw the console FPS birthed with Halo. We saw the character action game with DMC. And it is the last era where good movie tie-in games came out. Things like Alien Isolation notwithstanding. But these Lord of the Rings games, The Two Towers and The Return of the King, were truly wonderful games on the PS2, and the only reason why we got experiences like this is because of the low development time the PS2 had. And that's something I actually think gaming needs. It needs low development costs and times again. Now, it's kind of funny that back in the day, the PS2, when you saw it for the first time coming out of the PS1 and SNES, really, you were like, I'm probably not the only one who was like, wow, these graphics are so good. It'll never be better. And while graphical fidelity has obviously gotten better, I think there's something truly wonderful and beautiful about the way PS2 games look. They got a low poly aesthetic for sure, and they're made in a very specific engine, creating quite often a very iconic renderware look to them. And it's something that we can't even get indie games that look like PS2 games anymore. Like, the indie sphere has not gone to the PS2. They haven't even really gone to the PS1 yet in terms of like retro throwbacks. Now, you see a little bit of that with the retro FPS, which I'm very, very happy to see, but where are the PS2 looking games? Where's the creativity that existed within the 3D space in the PS2 era? The 2D space obviously is where we started out, but I think the true creativity of the 2D space really happened in the SNES era. That's where you get a lot of very unique experiences within the 2D space. And then in the 3D space, we get that early era of the PS1 where they're kind of messing around with stuff. It's creative, no doubt, but I think the PS2 is where creativity really goes off the wall. Because development costs were so low, you could do a lot of weird projects like Fatal Frame, for instance. And there's a kind of sauce that the PS2 had that we just don't have anymore. And I know I'm really just talking about the 6th generation because the Xbox and GameCube had their own beauty, but I grew up with the PS2, so that's the one I'm going to talk about. It was kind of a big cultural zeitgeist too. Everyone had a PS2. Everyone had a PS2 because of the DVD player, by and large. But let's be real with ourselves here. I don't know about all of you, but my stepdad loved playing games on the PS2 as well. He didn't just get that for the DVD player. He also wanted to play PS2 games, which is actually one of the core reasons I played Vice City and San Andreas growing up. They appealed to him. They were in the house. I played them. It's also why Mortal Kombat was appealing too, because we had no provisions put on us in terms of what kind of games could be played. And when you don't have that, the PS2 is even better because you get the full range of experiences. I remember that I got Return of the King, Godzilla Saved the Earth, and WWE SmackDown Here Comes the Pain all at the same Christmas, I believe. And these 3 games I played to death on the PS2. I 100% completed Return of the King, which has a very grindy completion right at the end of that game. And then I also played Godzilla Save the Earth so much. WWE SmackDown Here Comes the Pain. I would put all my friends into the game and we would all wrestle together. It's a game where you could get the 6-way multi-tap on that particular game. You could get 6 players playing at the same time, which I never managed to do, but I did get to play it once with more than 2 players, and it was such a good experience. Same thing with Godzilla Save the Earth. That is a game I always wanted to play with the multi-tap, with more than 2 people. Never really got the chance on that particular game. It would have been so fun. I dreamed about it all the time. But the fact that games back then had these like weird things about them, weird quirks that we could talk about today, is something I really don't see in a lot of modern games. I think the ease of use for them really deleted a lot of these types of things, where a game has a feature that you really can't experience, that you dream about all the time. And I think it really improved my experience with the games, right? Like, what would it be like if I could do this? When you're constantly thinking about a game in that particular way, it really stands out to you more. But it's not just that. I like the way that the games, there was no meta for game design back in the PS2. Off weird experiences could do super well, like Katamari Damacy, for instance. There wasn't an open world meta for single player. There wasn't a multiplayer only meta for first person shooters. There wasn't online functionality must be the thing that you focus on entirely for fighting games. You had experimental design. Fighting games had single player content that wasn't just a big waste of time where it's like, okay, these numbers actually don't mean anything. I'm unlocking garbage, whatever. You actually unlocked really cool stuff in fighting games like Soul Calibur 2 or Mortal Kombat Deception. And then we also got very crazy experiments like the AVP RTS game, for instance. What the heck is that? We got massive computer games that got put onto consoles, like Doom 3, that was an Xbox, but, you know, bear with me, or Morrowind, which was also Xbox. But you also got, like, Half-Life 1 on PS2, and those PS2 versions of those PC games are actually fundamentally different from the actual PC game itself. And it's kind of interesting to look at that, look at The Sims 2 and others like that, and why they're designed the way that they are, and what did they have to cut, what did they have to change. It's very fun to look at that, for me at least. And this is one of the cases where, when I talk about vintage games, this is very hard for me to separate nostalgia from the PS2 era specifically. Very easy to separate from the SNES, the NES, or the PS1 because they didn't make up a massive part of my formative years, but the PS2 really did. You know, it was like 4th grade all the way to 10th grade for me. Growing up was that PS2 era. So it was such a massive part of my formative years that it's very hard for me to not feel some manner of nostalgia for this particular thing. And it was just such a special era to grow up in. You know, my cousin, he would carry PS2 games in like the pocket of his shorts all the time. And the number of times where we just like walked outside and went to somebody's house that you just met that day to go play like a PS2 game for a while was like crazy unique. You know, I'm not, obviously didn't grow up in the modern era, clearly, but I don't think people have that experience anymore of just like walking outside, playing outside for a little bit, and then in the middle of that, somebody rips a PS2 out of their shorts that they just had in there while you guys were playing basketball or stick fighting or whatever it was. And they're like, hey, you guys want to play this? That just doesn't happen anymore, I don't think. That was such a fun era. And I also really liked how when you went to somebody's house to play PS2 games, you always got a crazy experience. Like, there was so much variety to the games available that I think it's the reason I'm a variety gamer. I'll be honest with you. I grew up in poverty, so I didn't have access to a lot of my own personal games, but I did know people and I borrowed games all the time. And that really framed my interest in variety games because the games I was playing were all very different. I jumped from Mortal Kombat Deception to GTA San Andreas to like Katamari Damacy, right? Like, these are all very different games. And I think it really framed my interest. And the fact that the PS2 was backwards compatible with the PS1 means that you could play PS1 games at the same time, and those were being traded around all the time. And there's just something about the physical trading of games. Like, hey, I'll let you borrow that, you give me that. Or, as what would happen, I'll trade you this PS2 game for this PS2 game. There's just nothing like that anymore. Even just doesn't happen within the adult space. I remember my stepdad doing the same actions, right? Like, oh, I borrowed this game from Terry down the street. Oh, I traded that game away for this one that I got from Mark in the woods. And that kind of stuff just happened all the time, man. And so, yeah, the adults were playing variety games around us, and then we got to play it ourselves. It was kind of just a unique era of gaming that honestly can't be recreated, but I would like to at least see the game design of that era come back. So, as we get older and as we separate ourselves from our youth, it can sometimes be very sad. And sometimes I look back on this era in a forlorn capacity as well. But by and large, I'm very much someone that looks forward to the future. So I do want to end this video with this final message. Lose not your heart and ride to ruin and your world's ending. Because that is what we are all doing. We all reach the end of our worlds, and we have to pass it on to the other people. But that doesn't mean that we can't share why it was special to us. So I want to throw it back to you guys. Why did you enjoy this era of gaming? Do you wish that you could have grown up with this era if you didn't? Let's talk about it in the comments below, and while you're down there, consider smashing the like button, subscribing, and ringing the notification bell. I make new gaming videos every Wednesday and Friday, and you may like my other and future work. Regardless of what you choose to do, thank you guys for going down memory lane for me, even in this brief capacity. And thank you for keeping it real with Rayl Deal Games. I appreciate your time, and I look forward to chatting with you in the next one.